streaming some good streams here. Yeah, I forgot to
disproportionately
test
compared
this.
to wealthier whites.
That's
Okay, we're good.
not true.
Alright, welcome to this live stream. I'm going to be reacting to Mr. Xexizy. Or should I say Sexizzy with that hair, am I right? So this is another video of his on identity politics and intersectionality. He's made a few of these, and talked with him a little bit about it. Like, when we made a podcast about so-called identity politics, and made some videos out of them. One of them was called Combat Brocialism. I kind of gave it a sensational title. And he commented on that, and we reacted to his comment in our 500 subscribers video, so you can go back and watch that if you want to see. And since then, I've commented on his videos a couple times whenever he brings this stuff up, pretty much. So yeah, so you can already see how I disagree with him, and I expressed that. I've told him a few times, and now he's made this video, which is kind of, seems like there's more arguments here, so I'm going to react to this one. And, yeah. I wonder if I should, whatever. Alright, let's do this.
I'm coming out for reason. Bring reason back. Make reason sexy.
That's pretty
again. Make
he is
evidence
like
sexy again. That's my
point.
Philosophy. Like, because if we're not arguing with facts,
so
we're arguing with feelings.
Through this stuff.
Committed to whites
this
by
was
non-whites. That's.
I knew JonTron was reactionary, but I didn't realize he was all about, you know, more racial purity. That's pretty, wow. Kind of almost went full, you know, not to bring up Godwin's Law, but wow, you went really out on that one. Surprising. I wonder what others think, because I doubt the H3 guys would agree with him on that, but anyways, okay, now the video has begun. So, with my take, I don't think identity politics is really a useful category for politics, because, you know, just, it depends what the identity is. If it's an oppressed identity, then the politics are probably going to be tending towards liberation, and you can build a socialist movement out of that most of the time. And you can see that in the examples of Cuba and Vietnam. They used nationalism and mixed it with socialism, and they had a social revolution after that. So I don't see how anyone can really, any socialist can really dismiss identity politics totally out of hand. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then on the other hand, of course, if it's identity politics of a relatively privileged group, then it's probably going to be reactionary. As you can see with, you know, people like...
Proportionally compared to wealthier whites.
That's just not true.
I've been meaning to make another video on identity politics for a while now,
and
it having been International Working Women's Day recently.
Working
scum! A lot of the topics that I wanted to discuss.
Okay, yeah. that was kind of funny.
Have come up in at uni and online and various other places, so
Uni.
I figured I'd, you know, make a script and get around to doing it. Now this video is mainly going to be going through what is identity politics and what is intersectionality and why I don't really think it's compatible with Marxism. So first, what is identity politics? Now the term identity politics really gets thrown around a lot on the online left these days. It's often used as a catch-all terms for issues like free speech or gender issues or anti-discrimination in general. And this has kind of led to both sides of pro and anti-identity politics becoming hypersensitive to the term. So what is it? Well, identity politics isn't an inherently left or right idea. It's actually something that historically and today still is being used a lot by both sides. Identity politics is almost like an ideological template that any...
Hang on, let's go back here. Because this is actually kind of interesting. Where was that?
Actually something that historically and today still is being used a lot by both sides.
There she is, Shanti Binks. I actually saw her in real life once, because that video was taken at U of T, So, it's kind of my neighborhood. So it turns out that I don't know, maybe someone she knows lives near me once, and she's not actually that annoying in real life. In real life, as long as she's not arguing with someone, she's usually not yelling and being as condescending as she is in that video. It kind of just goes to show you how, there's like this whole reactionary right-wing hegemony online, especially on YouTube, that's framing things in a certain way. I don't think it's really accurate. Anyway.
Identity politics is almost like an ideological template that any group can kind of take and then substitute in various identities and groups that they oppose and are against to suit their own narratives. Now,
yeah, sort of, but I mean that's a pretty idealist way of looking at things, just saying that they're similar for this sort of vague reason. It kind of reminds me of people saying that communists and Nazis are similar because they're both spooky authoritarians, even though they're trying to accomplish completely different things. I would think that Mr. Xexizy wouldn't agree with those arguments, as he has this fine mustachioed fellow on a poster in his room, although that's kind of lighthearted, I guess. Whatever.
Two main concepts of this template. Firstly, the idea that everybody in identity has more or less the same interests and faces...
Yeah, but by the way, we share, like, that thing with the Hillary Clinton and I put that in one of my videos. Like, we totally don't disagree with what you're saying on liberal postmodern identity politics. I absolutely agree when it comes to that.
The same problems or benefits, be it women, Jews, or any identity. This is why I hate the fact that the UN removed the working part from International Working Women's Day. It implies that women like Rosa Luxemburg and Theresa May have the exact same interests and face the exact same problems.
Like that picture of her.
Or to extrapolate on that George Soros and the friendly rabbi down the street both want the exact same thing in the world. That being, of course, cultural Marxism. But when you actually lay it out like this, it kind of becomes obvious how ridiculous it is. And furthermore, it's where the idea stems from that having a black president somehow helps racism, or more female CEOs will end sexism, things like that. Liberalism. Secondly, identity politics will base the merit of someone, or the validity of their views, to their identity. I think the former isn't really a problem on the left, but the latter definitely is. Now, this is also known as the right to narrate. It's essentially the idea...
I don't know if anyone's really making that argument, though, that you can only talk about problems if you're a member of that group. I don't know. This kind of strikes me as a bit of a straw man. I don't think people are really saying that so much as they're saying that you ought not to just dismiss certain issues out of hand if you're not a part of that group. More specifically, if you haven't experienced that kind of oppression, because how do you know they're making it up? How do you if you don't walk a mile in their shoes, indeed you can't, then it's kind of hard. It's kind of an epistemic problem. How do you really know that this problem is not as bad as you think it is? Maybe it is just as bad as they think it is. You don't know. I think that's really what they're saying. I don't think people are really saying that you don't have a right to talk at all if you're not a member of a certain group.
That only certain people with certain identities are allowed to have opinions or talk about certain topics. Now, in order to point out the main problem with this, I'm going to quote Zizek.
Yeah, obviously that's wrong. If anyone is saying that, then that's taking it way too far. You don't have to do a Zizek impression. Although this is a pretty good Zizek impression. I'm going to hand it to Mr. Botko for that one. That was a pretty good one. I mean, Zizek impressions are kind of getting old at this point, but nevertheless, this was a pretty good one, I think. Ah, shit. 1 second here. Come on.
To a particular experience which cannot be universalized is always and by definition a conservative political gesture. Ultimately, everyone can evoke his or her unique experience in order to justify their reprehensible act. It is not possible for a Nazi executor to claim that his victims did not really understand. The Nazi film director spoke despairingly in the 1950s. No American Jew could really understand his situation in Nazi Germany, and so on and so on.
Now that was on my friend of mine, Bacto. He has a cool YouTube channel. You should go check him out for more Zizek impressions. I think he has a couple videos of Zizek rapping death grips, so yeah, go check him out. Now, just to offshoot a little bit here, I do want to talk about privilege for just a second. Now, having actually thought about it and listened to some other people's points, I do think it's reasonable to say that things like white privilege probably do exist. I think statistics being in your favour simply for being born into a certain identity definitely warrants some privilege on its own, but more in regards to the right to narrate, I can understand why people might say, oh, well, your opinion probably won't be informed on this topic because this is a form of discrimination that's never really had to apply to you, so you've never really had to think about it. The only problem with this, though, is that people seem to actually use that as an argument against what people say. Taking what should just be an observation and then bringing it to the level of all people of a certain identity aren't allowed to have valid opinions on this topic is a cancer that is killing the left. What I'm trying to say is, yes, it's probably true. No, if you want any hope of ever convincing anybody ever, do not...
But I mean, again, it's kind of an epistemic problem. Like, if someone just refuses to believe that this problem is affecting this group that bad, then that's why they say stuff like that. Like, you're privileged. You don't experience this oppression, so the fact that you don't believe it doesn't really tell me much. It's not useful. I don't care that you don't believe it. I know that it's real because I experience it, and many other people experience it. It's I think that's what they're really saying. It's qualia. If you look up qualia, it's like the thing about qualia is they say there's a thought experiment called Mary's Room where you say, imagine there's this girl Mary was born in a room where there's no color, everything's black and white, and she reads everything there is about the color red, but she's never seen it before. When she leaves the room and she sees something that's red, does she learn something new? That's an expression of what qualia is. You can read about something as much as you can, but to actually experience it firsthand is different. There's something about that you can't really you sometimes just can't convey to other people, and that's why I think so-called identity politics is kind of useful, because in an era where official discrimination is no longer a thing and no longer legal discrimination, there's all kinds of other de facto oppression against people that it's kind of hard to explain unless you actually experience it yourself.
Actually bring it up in a real argument, because that's just ridiculous. It just drives people away, and ultimately it doesn't really matter, because you should just be focusing on the content of the arguments instead of who's saying them. I mean, yes, straight white men benefit from the current system, but if you're a Marxist in any sense of the word, you'll realize that somehow putting the responsibility of this on individual straight white men is just ridiculous. It's akin to the argument that slave owners should let their slaves free. It literally does nothing to change the already established system that allows slavery to exist in the first place. You've got to change the system, not the people. To suggest otherwise is simply utopia.
Oh, right.
Now let's get into intersectionality. Now, as somebody on a university campus, intersectionality is a term I come across a lot. However, I've noticed when I talk to people online as well, it's often used interchangeably with general anti-discrimination.
Interchangeably?
That's really not what it is. Sure, intersectionality is a method to try and combat oppression and discrimination, but it is distinctly different from the Marxist method of class analysis. Intersectionality is the idea that oppression of separate identities must be treated separately and individually, and I don't know if this is inherent to the idea, but I hear this being pushed a lot when people talk about it, that only those part of the identity that is being oppressed can liberate themselves from this oppression. Now, the biggest problem with this is that it treats class as it would other things like sexism and racism. Now, I'm not trying to compare different issues and say which one is more important. However, what I am saying is that class is definitely unique from any other kind of oppression, and therefore can't be handled in the same way. Class struggle is the origin of all struggle, to paraphrase Marx. What this means is that all forms of systematic oppression within society are only possible through the pre-existing class structure that exists already, and furthermore is perpetuated by it in order to function more efficiently for the ruling class. Therefore, it's only with the dismantlement of private property and the abolition of classes that all forms of oppression can be ended indefinitely. This does not mean no gains can be made under class society, but it does mean that you're never going to actually solve the root problems for why these things are happening in the first place.
Right, but if gains can be made, then why don't we make them? And if we're making them, then isn't that pro-Idpol then? I don't know.
Till it does, the best that can be done is trying to consciously change people's individual behaviour and implicit biases. While on individual social relations
So he says the best thing that could be done until then is to change people's implicit biases. But then earlier he said we have to change the system, not the people. So is that not a contradiction? Like, why did you say that earlier? Don't bother looking at the individual. I don't get that. Well, this is kind of a scary freeze frame here. Let's move on.
Can make a difference. I feel like this quote sums up quite well why bias localized to the individual is not the real problem that we need to be fighting. If a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem.
Yeah, okay,
if he's got the power to lynch me, he must be anti-capitalist. The power for racism, the power for... This quote also deals with the argument that discrimination can still exist under socialism. Sure, on an individual level, and it should be fought where it's found by all means.
Yeah,
but
not just
not
on an individual level.
And that's
why not?
undoubtedly the more important one. As these oppressive structures...
He just says it wouldn't exist on a systematic level. Why not? Like, I mean, not only does it exist, not only can it exist on a systematic level, it has historically. Another YouTuber, Mexi, brought this up in the comments, like, what about women's rights in Soviet Russia? And he said, well, they actually improved women's rights, but I don't know. Well, actually, yeah, there were a number of areas where this guy here, Stalin, and the leadership of the Soviet Union were socially backwards. You know, they're putting homosexuality was recriminalized, and I believe they put gays in the gulags. Mind you, being pro-gay was basically unheard of back then, but still, it kind of goes to show you the fact that they weren't totally that much ahead of the game when it comes to you know, social progressivism, kind of in accepting minorities. So I don't see why there would just magically be no discrimination, because everyone has everyone would be totally non-bigoted for some reason. I don't know why, and it doesn't seem to give any reason why that would not happen. Just because you remove the motor behind those oppressions that started those oppressions in the first place doesn't mean that therefore when you take that away, all those oppressions will disappear with it. I think that's very fallacious. Certainly, Stalin himself wrote in his book Anarchism or Socialism that form and content is different. Content lags behind form. So just because it's a socialist society doesn't mean that everyone has totally perfect emancipatory socialist ideals. The content can still lag behind the form. People could still be bigoted, and in fact they were. There was so many gays in the gulags. Castro threw the gays in the UMAP camps. He had to apologize for that.
Go against people's interests, and there's no longer anything there to keep them actively in place, these structures will be immediately dismantled. The second reason class cannot be treated in the same way as race and gender is because this quote also deals with the argument that discrimination can still exist under socialism. Sure, on an individual level, and it should be fought where it's found by all means, but not on a systematic level, and that's undoubtedly the more important one. As these oppressive structures go against people's interests, and there's no longer anything there to keep them actively in place, these structures will be immediately dismantled. The second
immediately? Like what, the day after? I don't think so. Don't think so.
Reason class cannot be treated in the same way as race and gender is because class, unlike these things, is not an identity, but intersectionality still treats it like one. Class is the only thing out of everything else that is inherently material.
What do you call class consciousness? It's when the workers identify as workers.
material. Gender, race, sexuality, none of these things have to have material relations in the way that class does. Furthermore...
But they do, though. I don't see why it matters. They don't have to. That would be under full communism when they don't. But right now they do. They all have material factors that. I mean, that's the whole bit. That's the whole reason the oppression is real, because there are material. Oh God, I paused on another bad time. Anyway.
It's the composition of class structure that both distinguishes a society and forms and shapes the culture of that society. Culture could never be as radically changed and shaped by the average sexuality of a society as it is by its class structure. This is why intersectionality falls short. It rejects the Marxist conception of class and puts it on the same level as any other identity. Lastly, I also want to talk about this idea that only people part of an oppressed identity can liberate themselves from that oppression. This again goes against Marxism, as racism can never be truly ended while we are still under capitalism. So therefore, it is an indirect action of the entire working class regardless of identity, rather than a direct action of all black people. Now, I could explain in detail why racism is an inherent part of capitalism, but I feel like most people watching this video probably already know that, and I've done it in previous videos anyway. Although, if you really do want to know, leave a comment on this video and I'll explain it to you. The thing is with class analysis is it does not simply ignore race, gender, or whatever else. It actually has very good explanations as to why these identities are in the positions that they are today, and will continue to be while under capitalism. This is why I always consider the term class reductionist an oxymoron. Because if you're only focusing on class oppression, then you're actually encompassing every other form of oppression within it. If your analysis of class simply ignores racism or sexism, then you're not analysing class properly. But equally, if you're treating class as an identity in the same way as you would sexism or racism, then your analysis is equally as wrong. So I was just about to upload this video and I just wanted to throw one more kind of message in. I don't necessarily, you know, hate people who do agree with identity politics and intersectionality on the left, right? I'm fine with people having their own opinions. I mean, just like I'm fine to be comrades with and talk and chill with anarchists. I mean, I think they don't have a clue on theory behind the state, but that's fine. You know, they're still leftists, they still hate capitalism, and for that I like them. And, you know, likewise goes with people who are more pro-identity politics. Really, my biggest gripe with those kinds of people is how quick most of them are to just shut out any other kind of discussion. And I don't think this is an inherent part of identity politics or anything, and maybe it's just the mods on Reddit, I don't know. But I felt like it was just kind of worth throwing out there that this isn't meant to be some kind of, like, you know, crusade of hate or anything against people who disagree with me on the left. This is just meant to kind of give my opinion on why I think some people on the left kind of have it wrong on some things. You know, that shouldn't necessarily mean out enemies or something for anyone who does disagree with me. I don't know, maybe this is just going to be completely point splitting it, but I felt like it was worth saying anyway, so.
Fair enough, my fine friend, Mr.